Hello, Faisal. How is it going in Barcelona today?
Hello. It's beautiful. Not a single cloud in the sky.
Oh, sounds nice. I'm in London today, coming to you live from London. A few clouds in the sky here, if you can believe it. London in March. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining our live briefing on SubdoMailing. We'll give everyone just a couple more seconds to join, grab their tea, tune in. But Faisal, I know we have some great stuff going on today, and I'm excited to talk about it.
Yes,
You
me
ready?
too.
Should we get the slides up?
Let's get the lights up.
Awesome. While you're doing that, feel free to pull up that chat in live storm. I was about to call it live stream. We'll be keeping an eye on that throughout the session. You can also drop your questions in the questions section. We're here to have this be as interactive and fun as possible. We'll try to answer questions as they come up. No need to hang on to the end. But of course, with an expert like Faisal here, we have reserved a little bit of time for Q&A, so we can get into anything we don't cover during the live session at the end.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining. Like I said, we are thrilled that you are here. We have a wonderful live briefing. It's not a webinar. It's a live briefing. Don't call it a webinar today on the SubdoMailing attack. I'm Rebecca Ward, and I'm really thrilled to be here, Faisal, if you don't mind hitting our next slide for me. I realize I haven't had the joy of meeting everybody that's here on our live briefing, but I've been with Redsift for about 8 months, and I come by way of DevOps, application security, and computer networking. And I'm really excited to be talking about SubdoMailing today. But what's going to make it even more fun is my lovely co-host, Faisal Mislay, who a lot of our Redsift customers will know and love. He is a self-described email geek, but I think of him as a customer superhero that brings so much value to our customers here at Redsift and does know pretty much everything there is to know about email security. So Faisal, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks, Rebecca. Happy to be here and happy to be with you and explain our customers this campaign we've been following over the past couple of weeks.
Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get into it. A little bit about what we have in store for everyone today. So as we mentioned, this is a live briefing for SubdoMailing. So we're going to start off by bringing everybody up to speed on what exactly SubdoMailing is. Faisal's going to walk us through that so that we can really understand how this attack has been happening. And then from there, we're going to talk about what we've done at Redsift to really understand the impact of this and how it's affected the internet broadly and even some of our customers. And then from there, we're going to talk about practical steps you can take to mitigate this threat if it's impacted you and to prevent it going forward. So with that, let's start by talking about understanding SubdoMailing. And I'm just going to give a little bit of context from my side as to what makes this text so interesting, and then Faisal's going to get into the technical details. So just 2 slides on broader context first, which is email security since January has really focused on DMARC. A huge driver for that is the requirements from Google and from Yahoo for bulk senders. If you're not familiar with that, those are requirements put forth by Google and Yahoo, or Yahoogle, as we lovingly call them here at Redsift sometimes, that say if you send more than 5,000 emails a day to inboxes that end in gmail.com or yahoo.com, you need to have a DMARC record in place, amongst other things. We can see how that has really taken shape using the Redsift BIMI radar data that we have here on the right side of your screen. And there's been over 800,000 DMARC records added since January 1, which really show that people are moving and embracing this standard of DMARC to make sure that their email is getting delivered and reaping the benefits of not being able to be have spam or fraudulent mail sent on their behalf. But as it often goes with these things, as the defenders adopt, attackers are continuing to innovate and find ways around these security standards that do a great job at keeping email inboxes safe from spam and fraudulent mail. But there are gaps in these standards because they can't cover everything. And that's what we're going to talk about today in how subdomailing comes to life, because that's exactly what happens. Attackers were able to send fraudulent mail on behalf of well-known and recognized brands by finding non-patchable attack surfaces to exploit. So that might be things like stale or misconfigured or forgotten assets in a DNS, like we're talking about today. But those non-patchable attack surfaces in 2023 were making up 10% of an enterprise's exposure. And by 2026, will make up more than 50%. So it just shows that this is becoming really critical, in addition to those standards-based security practices like email, also embracing that non-patchable attack surface and getting visibility so that that's another attack vector that isn't able to be exploited. So Faisal, that's my context setting. Why don't you tell us a little bit more about kind of how these two factors of DMARC and folks embracing DMARC, but attackers innovating to find paths in through non-patchable attack surfaces has actually come to life and is no longer something we're talking about as a hypothetical.
Absolutely. So with this subdomailing attack that was unveiled by Guardio Labs about 2 weeks ago, the combined threat is no longer hypothetical. And the root of this attack is bad actors capitalizing on poor DNS hygiene by companies. As a result of that, attackers can send fraudulent emails on behalf of the company, inheriting their authentication and their reputation. And as such, brands then have to move rapidly to fix it because their brand is now being their brand reputation is suffering. And because most of these attackers are taking advantage of flaws in DNS to pass authentication, these emails are not getting caught by DMARC. So let's drill down a bit into these causes of subdomailing to understand the attack a bit better. So let's say you have a payment gateway and you hire a third-party vendor to handle that infrastructure for you because you're not PCI compliant, etc. So you create a CNAME from pay.yourdomain.com to platform.externalvendor.com. Let's say that you decide to shut down your storefront, and the vendor goes out of business eventually. They let the domain lapse, and a couple of years later, an attacker says that you haven't removed your CNAME, and externalvendor.com no longer exists. So they can snap up the domain for $10, and they can now set up any type of DNS record. They can set up an MX record to receive email, TXTs to authenticate with SPF, and then take advantage of that subdomain you created and your reputation at the root domain to send emails, malicious emails, as you. The DNS Institute came out with a white paper in 2020 where they found 393 domains have at least one dangling MX record in their list of the Fortune 100 and the S&P Global largest 100 banks. And they've only had less than 3% success rate in getting companies to pay attention. Once the attackers have control of the destination target, they can start sending fraudulent emails that are going to pass SPF. As you can see here, this is an example from our telemetry data. We can see that the IPs are already flagged as by reputation by our threat partners, but that doesn't stop the domains, the attackers from impersonating and hopefully passing delivering into the inboxes. You can see here, and it was not a small attack either. If you combine all these, you probably have around 250,000 emails, if not more. When the research came to light a couple of weeks ago, organizations found themselves in the spotlight, and it's like, either we fix this fast or people are going to start finding Guardio's website and they're going to see we haven't fixed it, and people are going to think we're not security conscious. So Guardio's reported organizations, like the ones on screen, have already solved their dangling DNS as reported by Guardio.
And Faisal, I actually want to just jump in on that point you just made, because I think in, a lot of cybersecurity incidents, and our screens can seem to keep jumping around, but hopefully people are seeing this slide's okay. The attack vector is made known, and then maybe some people move to address it. Certainly the ones that are in the press, because as you said, they don't want to be made to be known as unsecurity conscious. But the speed with which the organizations have moved to address subdomailing has really been unprecedented, because there are so many implications of having that insecure DNS and sending that fraudulent email on behalf of these organizations. So as we try to assess how impactful is subdomailing and how seriously do I need to take this threat at my organization, I think the speed is just the speed with which these organizations have resolved it is a testament to how serious this is. So that's my 2 cents. Thanks for letting me jump in, Faisal. Keep going.
Of course. So when, as soon as the research came out, we dove into it head first, and we started figuring out how can we help? How can we help the community? So turns out that we had already discovered the first instance of what would become subdomailing back in January. One of my peers discovered that one of his customers was having a lot of authenticated bad reputation emails happening, and he was trying to decipher what could be going on. And that is when we discovered that one of their subdomains was pointing to a stale domain that had been taken over by the attackers, and they had deployed an SPF we have not seen before. So we then started pulling the strings, and as of last week, we had detected 149 cases of MKTO takeover domains, of which 139 were still live. Meaning the CNAME chain had not been broken yet. So now we went into, okay, this is a real threat. We have real customers impacted. Let's assess the damage, and let's see how widespread this really is, because we believe the Guardio research was only the tip of the iceberg, and we could dig deeper. So Redshift is uniquely positioned in because our people, platform, and data made it possible to discover and notify all our customers within 72 hours of the research going live. So our main 3 pillars were identifying the subdomains that had the poisoned SPF includes, using our global domain feed of about 70 million Apex domains that we scan. We then validated the suspicious includes using passive DNS signals, real-life spam trap feeds, and IP threat level from our threat intelligence partners. And then we used our own dog food to find all impacted subdomains in our customer base using our Redshift ASM, on DMARC, and dynamic SPF products. I'm going to dig deeper into these 3 pillars and how exactly we did every step. So first, we needed to identify all the subdomains and all the poisoned SPF includes. We discovered that the poisoned includes followed the same pattern, and they were all created with a domain generation algorithm that munched 2 words together, and then the attackers mass registered those domains to be used as the attack vectors for all the IP deliveries. So with the subdomains identified by us, plus the subdomains identified by Guardio, we had a pretty robust seed list that we could start branching out of. We then applied the pattern matching I was telling you about, and the domain generation algorithm to find all permutations that could be suspicious and that could host suspicious IPs. We then applied a GPT-4 classifier that we're still working on refining. The suspicious domains that needed more validation, that we weren't unsure, went through further validation. And then we started looking for related domains, whether it was registered in the same time period by the same actor on the same registrar, and then keep recursively searching until we have pulled all the strings. We then used passive DNS to look at the history of that domain. When did it become dormant? When did it become bought again by the attackers, and when it was taken over? And the DNS signals started coming to our feeds. So you can see here in the top two domains, it was fairly quiet because the domain either was dormant or had expired. Then as soon as the domain gets taken over by one of the threat actors, you can see a bunch of anomalous DNS activity be detected by our feeds, which is what I affectionately call the honeybee, because you can see it looks like a honeycomb. Same on the domain below. This one had a bit more activity prior, but as soon as it got taken over, you can start seeing an increase of anomalous DNS activity.
Yeah, and Faisal, I'm just going to jump in on this one as well, because I think these graphs really make the story clear. I think people that work with DNS can look at that and say, strings of changes to DNS like that would rarely, if ever, happen, and would come with a lot of frustration and potential risk for the organization. So it was such an interesting way that our team was able to validate if these domains we thought were suspicious were actually malicious, and represented here so interestingly. So a great way to look at that behavior and validate what we were suspecting from our side at Redsift.
Absolutely. So we now have the corpus. We now have a corpus of, I believe it's currently about a couple hundred malicious poisoned SPF. We then needed to find, okay, which of our customers are being impacted? Which ones are pointing to poisoned or taken over infrastructure? So a combination of Redsift on DMARC and Redsift AS made it possible to query every customer subdomain and SPF record within 24 hours. So we first queried our on DMARC database to see all the domains our customers had added, and then we cross-linked it with ASM to extrapolate any domains or any subdomains that customers may not have added to on DMARC, but were nonetheless impacted. And within 24 hours, we had an impacted customer list. So we can start reaching out and say, hey, Guardio just released this research. You are impacted. This is what you need to do. And this is why it's important that you take action now. And it's worth noting, and Rachel, feel free to chime in, as of this point, all Redsift customers have been notified, and we have...
Yes, I'll go ahead and jump in on that one, Faisal. So like you mentioned, within 24 hours of that initial list of the initial report being reported by Guardio, we worked to identify all of our customers that were impacted with those poisoned includes in their records for their domain or their subdomains. So if you haven't heard from us, that's a no news is good news scenario. If you have we're so thrilled to be able to work with you to make sure that you're protected, and we're able to move forward and put that behind us. So no news is good news. If you've been impacted, you've heard from us at this point.
Absolutely. Sorry, I had a little connection blip there.
Oh, good.
So once we've let our customer know, how are we going to mitigate and prevent this going forward? Because this is a never-ending task. Attackers are going to keep registering new lookalikes. There's going to be new domains ripe for takeover. This is going to be the new normal, let's call it that way. So, like I said before, Redsift is uniquely positioned to spot subdomailing because of the power of our people, our data, and our platform. When our founders, Rahul and Randall, created the Redshift platform about 7 or 8 years ago, they knew an attack like this could be coming at some point. So the whole Redshift platform is built on data analysis and interoperability between all our applications. That, combined with all the threat data feeds we get from different partners, means that we can analyze huge data sets and do cross-correlation between our products efficiently and quickly to get the data we need. We also power in some data feeds as well, besides our threat resources. So we actually scan a lot of data daily that we can easily use at our beck and call whenever an attack like this comes in.
And Faisal, I think one thing that's so cool with that is it's not just that we have all these data points. That is, the third-party data feeds are amazing, and the insight they give us as to what's happening across the internet broadly. But it's more than that. It's that protective apps, and it's the first-party insight to your specific assets, from domains and subdomains to hosts and IPs. So when you're able to layer those three things together between the preventative apps, the third-party risk feeds, and the complete visibility into your attack surface, you're able to correlate threats that you might miss if you're just focused on DMARC or if you're just focused on domains, and you can take action much faster having that complete visibility that's correlated across the entire internet. So that's my marketing. That's my marketing speak for that one, Faisal. But we did. Oh, sorry. Actually, keep going, Faisal. Keep going.
Oh, my bad. No, I was going to say, one of the other things we did is help you help yourself. So we've integrated subdomailing detection within on DMARC, also within 72 hours of the research coming out. So we now have all this data set. We've notified all our customers. How do we proactively expose all our research and all our data so that future customers can detect these attacks much quicker and get proactive signals before they can be before they need to be told by us? So all our tools, whether it's Dynamic SPF, Investigate, Domain Analyzer, or even the main managed domain page, now have subdomaining alerts. So, for example, if you use Dynamic SPF and one of your existing includes, or you add a poisoned include, will now show you an error and won't add those IPs to Dynamic SPF. In Investigate, if you send an email from a third party that may be compromised, will let you know if one of their includes is poisoned. Again, in the domain analyzer as well. And in the managed domains, will now show an error in the SPF column if you have an include that is poisoned and you're not using Dynamic SPF. We've also revamped our SPF checker that we launched at the end of last year, and it also detects subdomailers, and it will show you the whole chain. Like in the example here, you can see that there's 2 SPF includes compromised, and each of those has 4 additional includes. If you're CNAMing, we'll also show you the CNAME chain. So these are all changes that we've launched this week to see if you're impacted, whether you're a customer or not. And lastly, like most of you will know, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So with Redshift ASM, which some of you may know formerly as Hardenized, that we acquired about 1.5 years ago, with Redshift ASM, you can get ahead of these attacks before they happen. So Redshift ASM scans your entire perimeter, all your subdomains, and will detect dangling DNSs before they get poisoned by the attackers. And if you have any existing subdomains that have not been added to OnDMARC or any of our other platforms, we'll also notify you if any of your existing assets or existing subdomains is compromised. And that's, again, another way of how our tools interoperate and talk to each other. And you can basically grab the bull by its horns and get ahead of the game before it can even happen. And you can also connect it to your public clouds, whether it's AWS, GCP, Azure, or your registrar like Cloudflare, NS1, Mark Monitor, can't remember the others, but import your entire portfolio and proactively monitor it at all times so that you don't get caught by surprise. So lastly is, what are our next steps? And I'll hand it back to Rebecca so we can tell you what's next, what's in our roadmap.
Awesome. So, I think the three key things to remember coming from today is that for Redshift customers, we are keep in touch with your CSMs. As Faisal mentioned, we're continuing to analyze domains. We're recursively searching for poison domains. And this is a live situation that's continuing to change every day. So we have, as we mentioned, notified those that we've discovered subdomailers or poisoned SPFs in their records, but as we learn more, we'll continue to work closely with our customers to make sure that they are protected from subdomailing. The second piece is, if you're not a Redshift customer, definitely try out Redshift Investigate or on DMARC to see if you're impacted. And I should have also mentioned the SPF checker here, which is linked in the chat. Redshift Investigate is completely free. All you have to do is send an email. And Redshift on DMARC has a free 14-day trial so that you can go and see all those great subdomailing capabilities that Faisal mentioned and be very proactive in getting those taken down. And lastly, as Faisal mentioned, for those of you that have DMARC but are looking to fill in kind of those gaps that we mentioned, definitely check out or reach out to talk to us about Redshift ASM. Like we mentioned, that'll help you stay on top of domains, subdomains, hosts, IP addresses, and focus on prevention instead of the cure when incidences like this that come up from non-patchable vulnerabilities rise. So that's all we have. Faisal and I are here to chat, answer questions, go into more details if there are things you're curious about. This is the part of the webinar where we'll just dilly-dally for a few moments so people can put those questions into the chat. Always wish I had brought my stand-up jokes, practiced a little bit to fill this gap while we wait for people to type in questions. But Faisal, anything else from your end that you want to send people home with while we talk about that?
Well, the two primers is, don't think this can happen. These won't happen to you. This can happen to anyone. I've seen a 3-person company get hit because they don't have an IT team and they just create DNS when they're told to by their vendors. But we've also seen Fortune 100 companies that have probably 50,000 DNS records and don't have a good hygiene program in place either. So don't think this can't happen to you. This can happen to anyone. And attackers don't really care who you are. They just want to use your reputation to get into the inboxes and do damage.
Yeah. We just got a great question, Faisal, which said, Faisal, can you give an example of a typo in an SPF record being used as an attack vector?
Absolutely. I have seen various, especially with well-known sources. So one of the ones I've seen is Amazon SES. So one of the attackers registered Amazon without the A, just AMZONSES.com, and basically is preying on people making those typos. And then all of a sudden, all the attacker's IP space is now authenticated to send as that vendor. We've seen SendGrid typos. So pretty much any third-party email you can imagine, attackers have found typos. And attackers use the exact same technologies we use. They use passive DNS to scan what people have out there, what typos are out there, and then register them and start sending. So attackers are getting smarter. They're also using the same tools we are to prevent and defend, for them to look at victims.
Faisal, we got another question, which I don't know if you have this up and are able to, but someone was asking, can you show the SendGrid typo in the SPF checker?
Absolutely. Give me
Awesome. While you bring that up, I'm going to talk about my favorite domain that we saw as a typo in an SPF record, which was there were some docs that were talking about how to update your SPF record. And they mentioned put the domain, like example domain. It wasn't example domain, but it was something like exampledomain.com in your SPF. And some folks copy and pasted that into their SPF record. This group of bad actors discovered that that was an example that had kind of been widely proliferated by some copy pasting without maybe checking the work, and were able to take advantage of it, which I thought was really interesting, but I guess ultimately incredibly opportunistic of the bad actors that were behind this. So
So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. We're just getting things ready. Oh, this one even has a nicer aspect ratio than the slides. So this is the SendGrid one. And you can see here, the attackers have a bunch of just random domains inside it. And we're detecting it. And then you can highlight in the SPF tree, and it'll show you the entire tree. You can see here, for example, that the kpbvisit.com is a dangling CNAME as well. So not only they're using typos, but they're also using dangling CNAMEs to make it look more legit. So if you look, for example, another one.
Oh, Faisal, will you just highlight that domain real quick just to see the typo? It was super similar to SendGrid. It was.
Yep, it was so it was sendourgrid.net.
Oh, okay.
And then sendourgrid.net. And then the Amazon one is amazonses.com without the A. And again, you can see here an example of the DGA algorithm in place. And then again, they link to others. Another interesting thing is they don't care about the SPF lookup limit. You can see here that they just rammed in as much as they could. And just going back to Rebecca's point about the documentation, that was another good point that I should have brought up. So thanks for bringing it up. Third-party vendors that put placeholder domains in their documentation have to make sure to own the domains that they put in the documentation, or else people will blindly copy and paste, and that creates another havoc. You can see this one is even a bigger tree, and all these IPs are owned by, or the attackers have control of. I'm not going to scroll, just we will spend the rest of the live briefing scrolling down. But you can see easily like that. Another one I've seen interesting, I don't have it off the top of my head, but is staging environments. I've seen a lot of staging environments be pointing to either old load balancers or old IPs or old resources because it was a staging or a test or a dev environment that was spun down. Attacker, and the CNAME was never removed. Attackers are also taking advantage of that.
So the options are endless. It's like you mentioned, Faisal. It's casting a wide net as opposed to trying to get as much as you can, as opposed to, oh, this one typo is the way. It's trying everything and seeing what works so I can go send mail on behalf of your organization. Wonderful. All right. Anything else? I'm not seeing any new questions in the chat.
I think Trevor wanted to see it again. I think Terry, sorry, my bad. So this is one of my favorite ones because it's a nice, easy to understand of, instead of a subdomain attack takeover, this is an SPF poisoning. So you can see that msgdirect.co.uk and msgsend.co.uk probably belong to legitimate sources at one point, but those sources may have gone out of business. And then the attackers took it and then are now able to send, instead of a subdomain, they can send as this root domain, which is probably arguably even worse than a subdomain attack takeover, because you have access to the root domain directly. And again, we can show you where have we detected and where you need to remove them in your DNS.
Wonderful. All right. Well, I think that might be our show, folks. Unless Faisal, you have anything else before we wrap up? The live questions.
No. If any of my colleagues listening want to chime in the chat as well, Brian, Jorge, I know you've been seeing this in the field as well. I see Jorge typing.
The ...
Sorry, Grant. I didn't mean to forget you either.
We appreciate Grant's questions today. Well, wonderful. Well, thank you, everyone. We will have a recording to share, and we'll also send out some follow-up resources with the links we talked about today. Appreciate you making time in your day to talk about SubdoMailing, and if there are any questions that come up, you can always drop us a line, rebecca.warren@redsift.io and faisal.measley. Thank you, everybody. Have a great one.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone.